Lola Méndez is an Uruguayan-American freelance journalist. She writes about sustainability, travel, culture, wellness, and more for many print and digital publications, such as CNN, In Style, Oprah Magazine, Reader's Digest, Architectural Digest, Cosmopolitan, Remezcla, Refinery 29, and more. In addition to her responsible travel blog, MissFilatelista.com. Lola also offers a consultation service focused on landing pitches, which you can access via her website that I will put into the chat also, but it's lolaandmendez.com. In September, Lola set herself a goal to make $10,000 from freelancing alone, nothing else, and essentially like live tweeted the process, which I followed religiously. And it really blew my mind. So in short, I'd like what she's having, and I hope that she will share some of this wisdom with us today. So Lola, if you want to just give us like a brief background on sort of like how you've gotten to where you are today and managed this like amazing full-time freelance. It's kind of like the writer's dream, in my opinion. How do you manage the schedule, and how did you get to this place?
Thank you so much for such a beautiful introduction. You're going to make me cry. I'm really touched. So yeah, we can jump right in. First things first, I did not go to journalism school. I never even considered it. I loved writing in high school, but my high school English teacher was like, "You're horrible at this," because I always wrote outside the essay assignment. I took my own idea and I went with it. Was super creative, and she was not, and she never appreciated it very much. So I moved from Kansas, which is where I grew up, to Los Angeles when I was 17 to go to fashion school, which no one in my family was happy about, thinking that I wanted to become a buyer. Eventually I became a publicist, but my very first internship was at the LA Times. And back then, a lot of the major cities' newspapers had a weekly magazine called Metro Mix. So essentially I was interning for them, covering events and fashion events. And I loved it. And I took the first byline I had and I cut it out and I put it in the mail and I sent it to my high school teacher, and I was like, "Look at me now." And sometimes I wonder if she ever comes across my name and sees my byline in all these major publications. So my story really started off with someone telling me I cannot do it, which I think is probably very relatable to all of us that are the children of immigrants. You tell me I can't do it, and I will. So after that, I began to write for CBS for The Young and the Restless. This was in 2007, and they were launching a fashion magazine on the soap opera, and then hired me to write it on a blog, which is really like the absolute worst WordPress website you come across today. It was like the best kind of blog you could have in 2007. So I did that for a few months, and I really enjoyed it, but I would finish a piece, let's say a review of the gowns at the Met Gala, which happens on the first Monday in May. And then in June, they'd be like, "Oh, cool, this looks good, let's put it up." And I'd be like, "You can't put this up now, it's old news." And that was just kind of the way that it was working back then. And I decided at 18, I gotta move to New York City. I wanna be late before I even know what I'm supposed to be doing. At around the same time, I fell into PR and kind of left writing behind and moved into the PR, marketing, communication side of things. So then the next almost 10 years, 8 to 10 years or so, the writing I was doing were press releases and media alerts and pitches, which isn't quite as creative as working as a journalist, but I was still writing thousands of words a day and interacting with media. And I'm explaining this background because I think it's what gives me a competitive edge over other freelancers. Because when I started to pitch as a writer, I already had a database of editor contacts, and I was already meticulous at updating that list. I mean, people ask me for this list, and I'm like, "How many children are you giving me?" Because I have put 5 hours a week into this list for 5 years. Like, there's no money value on that. It is my baby. I really believe as freelancers, we're only as good as our editorial list. If you have a great story idea, but you have no one to send it to, it's like having a great product and no one's buying it. So keeping track of editor contacts is super critical to being successful in the business of freelance writing. I also learned how to become very nimble and resilient to rejection. As a publicist, you're also pitching editors, but you're pitching them your client. And I was working mostly with fashion clients. So it's a lot of like, "Please write about this dress." And a lot of the times, editors are like, "No." So you say, "Okay," and you move on. I became completely rubber. I got rejection all day long, but I knew if I kept sending it and sending it and sending it, that yes was coming. And that yes the publicist led me to have a dress on the cover of Elle magazine. I had a story on the cover of the New York Times. So I learned if you keep trying, the stories will land. And I took that mentality and that mindset with me into my next career as a freelance journalist. So I started writing about 4 years ago. I was traveling full-time in Europe. I had left a job in Italy that I hated. And I came across a listing on Facebook for a website called Travel Fashion Girl, which is actually also managed by a Latina. And she was looking for writers to write packing guides to cities all over the world. And I was like, I pack every few days. I worked in fashion for a decade. I can do this. So I reached out to her with no clips to show of. And she hired me. She said yes. And the very first piece I pitched, the very first piece I wrote with the byline was a packing guide to Uruguay, which is where I live now and where my family's from. So that was almost exactly 4 years ago. I kept doing that for about 6 months. I was making 5 cents a word. I was shocked. I could not believe that people would pay a nickel for the, a, when, where, like these very simple words. I just could not believe that people got paid per word because I knew nothing about the way journalism works. And as I was traveling throughout Southeast Asia, I got lucky and I started to meet other writers who started to tell me about different Facebook groups, different hashtags to look at on Twitter. And I realized the plethora of publications that were out there that I could be sending my ideas to. And I had some imposter syndrome. Like I said, I didn't go to J school. I was wondering if I even had a place in this career. So I really started with low-hanging fruit. I started to pitch a lot of travel publications that paid between $25 and $75, and I was thrilled with that amount of money. I'm not here for rate shaming at all. That worked for me. I needed to start building a portfolio. I needed to have clips before I could reach out to bigger publications. And the pub that I really feel like gave me my break into travel writing was Matador Network. I wrote initially probably like 10 to 15 really meaty features for them. I wrote a piece on the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar. I wrote a piece for them about children living on the streets in India, based on my travels and what I had seen. And I was already spending a lot of my time visiting NGOs and helping them develop their marketing plans. So I had great sources and I had people who had really important stories to tell, especially to travelers who don't know what their impact is on the Rohingya crisis when they visit Myanmar, or they don't know what to do when they come across a child on the street who is begging. And to have expert advice from the people who are working with organizations to support these marginalized people is what these travelers needed to be reading before they got to these destinations. But I was paid $40 for both of those articles. And for both of those articles, I was reading like World Health Organization reports, Amnesty International reports for hours and hours. So I quickly learned that I needed to start valuing not just the kind of story I was writing, but the time it took to go into it. And through joining some Facebook groups, I learned that 50 cents is really an average rate. A lot of people were making that, and I was making nothing in comparison. So I started to ask for 20 cents my second year of full-time freelancing, and then I moved up to 40 cents. And now I'm pretty firm about not accepting work under 50 cents a word, unless it's a passion topic, unless it's something I can write in under an hour, unless it comes from a press trip, which is essentially where a tourism board flies you to the country with the expectation that in return, you will be writing about their country, their destination, their hotel, their experience, whatever it may be, for various publications. That's kind of a quick overview.
Wow, that is a very impressive 4 years.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you brought up Facebook groups, and I'm actually pretty sure that might be how you and I met. Now that I think about it, so how, and that was what I wanted to ask you about next. How do you use social media to advance your career, or like find sources, or find jobs?
So I'm sure everyone knows about binders, even though we're not supposed to talk about binders. Don't get me in trouble. But that was how I started to find editorial contacts, because within this group of journalists, there are subgroups for almost every beat that you can imagine, almost every type of lifestyle, destination, or topic. And a lot of those groups already manage their own editorial list, which you then have access to. And then editors within those fields or within those beats or those verticals are often in the groups as well, and will post their calls for pitches directly into these groups. And there are other Facebook groups that do the same thing. This is specifically for women and non-binary people. And that was how I started to develop these contacts. But I really do think that Twitter is more useful, The only thing is that when an editor tweets a call for pitches, it's out there, right? So now anyone on the internet can see it. So it's really important that when you see a call for pitches on Twitter and you think you have an idea, don't sit on it. Like really, I actually think it's better to write a pitch when you only have 10 minutes to get together so that you don't dwell on it and write too much and spend too much time on it. I believe a pitch should be less than 300 words, ideally less than 200 words. Editors are super busy. They're not going to read a 1,000-word pitch. You're going to lose their interest. And if it had been shorter, they might have loved the idea. So keeping it short and sweet and kind of having that pressure on you to get the pitch out there works well. So when you see the call for pitches on Twitter, get out there and do it. I follow over 1,000 editors on Twitter. I have my own private list because a lot of editors don't really like being put on public list. But if you went to my Twitter, which is Lola Méndez, and looked at who I was following, you could easily also be following 1,000 editors on Twitter. I do manage a few public lists. I have a BIPOC journalist list, a BIPOC editors list, and a Latinx journalist and editors list. I think it was really important for me to show that there are many of us who are diverse, covering many different topics, after getting frustrated seeing my white peers writing about my community or issues that I felt like, how could they even know what to say about this when it's not something that they have lived through.
Amazing. And this would be my last question. I'll open it up to everyone, but could you just tell us a little bit what September was like trying to reach reaching your $10,000 freelance goal and how you did it?
Absolutely. It wasn't a goal until like halfway through the month. And I just calculated where I was at, and I was at $7,000, which is more than I've ever made. Even when I was a senior manager at a PR agency in New York City 5 years ago, I was making less than that a month. And I was like, wow, I'm so close to that 5-figure number. I think I can do it. Like, I just knew I could do it. And I don't feel that way often. And when I do feel that way, I listen to that instinct. And not only had I already not earned, because you get paid months later, but I had already filed $7,000 worth of work for the month. I had time. I didn't have a lot of deadlines in those next 2 weeks. And I was like, okay, like I can do this. And I reached out to all of my editors that I have close relationships with that do pay me 50 cents a word or more, because I knew, okay, if I can get 4 or 5 500 to 1,000 word pieces at that rate, I can hit that number quickly. 75% of them got back to me with assignments. I wasn't even sending them pitches. I was saying, I'm available for work. What do you want written about? Because I'm here. And they came to me and they said, oh, actually, you'd be perfect for this, or you'd be perfect for that. And then I keep a really meticulous pitch database where I highlight pitches that are what I consider to be in consideration, as in the editor has responded to me, they've maybe expressed some kind of interest, but I haven't gotten that contract yet. I haven't gotten the confirmation where like the conversation's still in works. And I emailed back saying like, hey, if you're interested in this idea, it's something I could file in the next week or two. And so I got quite a few commissions that way. And then I tweeted that I was available for work, and I tweeted that this was my goal and I was going for it. And all of a sudden, editors I never even worked with were sliding into my DMs being like, for instance, Business Insider asked me, can you write about this goal? I said, of course I can. So that was $400, right? And then another publication reached out to ask me to write about what it's been like to be in Uruguay during the pandemic and to be a freelancer in this time and to be spending time with my family as a 31-year-old for the first time since I was 17, and all these different things that I didn't even realize I could be writing about, right? They weren't personal essays that I had been ideating. They were ideas that editors came to me with. So it was kind of a mix of those three things. And then I actually ended up surpassing it significantly. I earned $12,000 in September, which is still kind of hard for me to wrap my mind around.
That's really amazing and inspiring. If anyone has a question, you can just unmute yourself or raise your little blue hand, which is my favorite thing to say. Anyone?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you sound so confident and experienced. First of all, thank you for being here. But you brought up the imposter syndrome, and I was wondering how you managed to overcome that feeling.
That's challenging. I think we each probably have our own ways of doing it, but I've always gone after what I've wanted. I've never been the kind of person who talks about a dream they have as something I might do in the future. When I start to have a dream, it's like I do it now. So when I do feel imposter syndrome, I ask myself why. Like, there are publications I'm still about pitching. Like, I haven't pitched the New York Times very much. I haven't pitched the Washington Post very much. I still feel like, do I belong there? Will they accept me? Are they just going to tell me never to email them again? Like, I feel that sometimes. And every time I felt that way and pitched a publication that made me feel that way, I've never been told, don't ever pitch me again. I've never been told, like, get out of here. Editors aren't around to make us feel terrible, you know? Like, for instance, a big goal publication or dream publication for me was Refinery 29. And I reached out to them, I think in February or March, with a personal essay I wanted to write that brought together, it kind of intersectioned at travel, beauty, indigenous, my indigenous background, and all these different factors. I had no idea who to pitch, but I knew they did a lot of tattoo coverage. So I just picked a random editor and emailed her. Completely cold email. She did not have a call for pitches. We've never corresponded. I was pretty sure she was a political editor. She got back to me and she loved the idea. So really, I think it's just taking that leap of faith and building up your ability to let rejection slide off of you and to let rejection become an opportunity is the tool that I've used to push through my imposter syndrome, and a tool that I really think all journalists can benefit from. Because when your idea gets rejected, or worse, you don't even get a response, it has absolutely nothing to do with you or your idea or your work. We don't know what an editorial calendar is like, right? Maybe for a print magazine, we see what the theme is for every month, but we don't know what's on their calendar. Perhaps they sent an idea that they love, but it's just not a fit for their current roster of ideas. But maybe in December, the same editor might email you back and be like, hey, is that still available? I have editors email me 6 months later, can I get this story still? And I'm like, what? But yes, it's available, so you can have it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Otherwise, I will have another question.
I have a question. So I'm actually really excited because like yesterday, someone like, well, I guess he's an editor. He's opening a new website, and he emailed me because he saw my work online. He was like, "I want you to write for my new website," and I was super excited about that. But then when I said my rate, he was like, "Okay, that's too expensive," and I said like, 40 cents per word, and I was like, "Well, I mean, I go to J school, like." It's not like I don't have any education and I have like bylines in like national publications. So I was like, no, I want to stand by my rate. And he was like, I'm sorry, but I don't think I can pay that right now. And so I guess like how do you deal with that like negotiation part? Because like it has been really hard for me. I feel like as of now I'm like, oh my God, but he actually reached out to me. Like first time someone reaching out to me, you know? And
That
yeah.
feels amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's a huge ego boost when an editor reaches out to you and asks you to write for them. But at the end of the day, this is still a business and you still need to make the money that you know you're worth. So it's really great that you stuck to your rate. It's always tricky when an editor asks you what your rate is. They're probably trying to figure out how low they can go, because usually probably they think you're going to say a number lower than what they have in mind. And so he, maybe he expected you to say 10 cents a word or 20 cents a word. If it's a publication you really want to write for, see what else you can negotiate. Can you negotiate the word count? Can you negotiate how many sources? Can you negotiate the deadline? Could you come to an agreement where at whatever rate he can work with, you get to write 5 to 10 pieces a month? Because having that kind of anchor client can really help, knowing that you have a set, let's say it's 20 cents a word, 1,000 word pieces, and you get to write 5 or 6 a month. That might be enough to cover your rent. And then you can focus the rest of your time pitching ideas you're really passionate about.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because that's what I was thinking, more like being like, well, if you hire me for like a couple of articles, then I could definitely lower my rate a little bit. But like, what do you think would be like a good average? I don't know. Yeah.
It really depends on the writer and it depends on the work, right? So you might want to take into consideration, are these features? Are they personal essays? Are they lists? Do you need to interview 2 to 3 people for these pieces? Are they obscure? Like, are you going to have to scour the internet to find, I don't know, a potato farmer in a specific town in Idaho? Or is it any kind of farmer anywhere in the world where it'll be easier to find a source? Think about all the back end work that's going to go into putting this piece together and then determine your rate that way. So if it's, for instance, I do trending news writing for Ramez Club, and they pay $60 an article, which is significantly below my rate, right? They're 300 words, but they take me 15 minutes to 30 minutes to write. So it might be below my per word rate, but my hourly goal is $100 an hour. So if I can write 2 of those in an hour, I'm actually making $120, even though I'm making less than my per word rate.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you. That was really helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Lola. My name is
Hi.
Angie. Thank you so much for being with us. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, I know you spoke about having a Facebook group and meeting a lot of people there and having even contacts beforehand, before even becoming this writer that you have becoming now. But which social media, Twitter, Facebook, has helped you the most, and how can we use it to become freelancers or use maybe tools within them?
I think Facebook helped me in the beginning because I didn't know how to utilize Twitter. And once I was accepted into these groups, so much of the information was just there for me to devour. You know, I didn't have to go digging for it. But I personally have found a lot of these groups I was talking about before, they can be a bit problematic. They're not the safest places for women of color. And I've left a lot of them. I know a lot of my editors have left a lot of them, and really taken it to Twitter. So what I would say, like I was mentioning before, follow editors on Twitter, make a private list within your own Twitter feed, editors, and then you can scroll through that list looking to see who's posted call for pitches. You can utilize the search box on Twitter to find an editor contact. Again, we can mention Refinery29. So if you wanted to find an editor at Refinery29, just go to the search tool, type in Refinery29 editor, and then click on people. Because most editors have, at the very least, their name and their publication and their bio. And a publication like Refinery29, all of their emails are configured the same way. First name dot last name at refinery29.com. So once you know that configuration, you can then plug the name in. But many editors also have their email right in their bio. So when you have some free time, what I would do is start to build your editor list. Not just based on editors who've actually posted calls for pitches, but you can take their email anytime, put it into a list. The way I organize my list is publication, first name, last name, title, and then beats. So if they have tweeted looking for personal essays about Latina Equal Pay Day or personal essays about the election, whatever kind of things they've looked for in the past, I make note of that. And then in the future, when I have an idea I really want to write and it has to do with my Latina identity and politics, I search in this document, Latina politics, and then it shows me everyone who's looked for those things before. Does that kind of make sense? Because cold pitching gets a bad reputation, but I think especially during the pandemic, a lot of my work has come from cold pitching.
Can you talk about pitching now? How many publications how many maybe outlets do you send your pitches to?
Sure. During the first few months of the pandemic, so from March until August, I sent over 100 pitches every month. That's an astronomical amount. I do not suggest that you aim for that. I was panicking, especially because my main focus was travel. I lost all of my work. I lost my retainer clients. Articles that had already been commissioned were canceled. I mean, it was just, everything was gone, right? So I was just hustling to try to find any work at all. I think a more reasonable amount would be maybe 10 to 15 pitches a month. And like I said before, a pitch should be short and sweet. It's an elevator speech. It's a who, what, when, where, why. So remove all the fluff. I start my pitches literally just by saying, hi, hope you're doing well. Would you be interested in this about this? So a narrative piece about this experience. An interview with this person who has this opinion that is timely because of this. And then a paragraph about that. I end it with, I'm a freelance writer with work in CNN, Oprah, Refinery29. I usually write about sustainability, social justice, tourism. You can see my portfolio here. Thanks, Lola. Really short and sweet. And I think that is an art, you know, but your pitch is also a writing sample. So you don't want to just slam it out and send it. Read it out loud, run it through spell check, you know, make sure that your idea really gets across and it really comes across what your unique take is. You will find as you progress in your career that every idea you have, someone else has had. And there will be times that you've sent a pitch to a publication and they publish a piece that's so similar and you're like, they stole my idea. They didn't. there are no original ideas, right? So what you want to do is make sure that it's really clear why you are the writer for the piece that you're suggesting, especially as a freelancer. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. Pass it on to
Sure.
Danielle.
Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Hi. Danielle, do you want to go?
No, Alexandra, go.
Okay, hi. Thank you for being here. Sorry my screen's off.
No worries.
I have two questions. The first is you talked a lot about using Twitter as far as the tools and how to utilize it for freelancing. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of, like, I'm new to Twitter and I'm relatively new to journalism. So, and like the past times I've been on Twitter, I've used it a specific way. And so now trying to be on there with my full name as a professional, like, can you just talk about some Twitter best practices?
Oh, I'm probably like not the best person to talk about this because I tweet all kinds of inappropriate things all day, every day. Like I told Danielle's laughing because I'm sure she's seen my like raunchy tweets before, but I tweet about my life also. And that's gotten me work. Like editors have reached out and been like, oh, do you want to write an essay about that? I'm like, yes, I do. But so that's just me.
So
and
that's why you are, but that's why you are the best person to ask, because you have proven that you've managed to like build this really successful career. And so basically you're saying like, just do whatever you want within reason, or?
I mean, don't be super problematic, be opinionated, know that anything you tweet, anyone who wants to work with you can see. And I'm just not very ashamed about anything in my life, right? So I tweet about my sex life. I tweet about like hair removal. Like I tweet all kinds of things that my mom is probably, I think I blocked her from my Twitter a few times, but she's probably like mortified inside when she reads it. Sorry to Danielle's mom. But I do think, I've actually never thought about this before, but I do think that's also what's given me a personality. And I am an essayist, right? I do write a lot of personal essays, and it's important to have a personality as an essayist and have an opinion. But as far as, let's get back to the question here. So with social media, it's a great place to find out what editors are looking for. It's a great place to find their contacts. You should definitely follow them and interact with them, but don't be sliding into their DMs asking like how their lunch was. Like be professional in the way you interact with your editors on social media. With your peers is a different story. Like Danielle and I have been DMing forever and we've never met, and that's cool. I love it. I have DMs all day long with a lot of fellow writers. I almost feel like my community, like my office is Twitter, and we lean on each other. So the way that I interact with my peers, like my writing peers, is different than the way I interact with my editors. And the way that I speak to editors over email, over Twitter, whatever, is I always reflect their language. So if someone responds to my pitch and is like, cool, love this, 500 words, $250, I'm like, hey, thanks, I'll have it to you next week. If someone responds and they're like, dearest Lola, thank you so much for sending this idea my way. I would love to commission this and was considering that it could be an in-depth feature. You get what I'm going with this, right? That I would then respond in a very professional, for me, like kind of buttoned up kind of way. That I mirror the way people communicate with me. And again, I think that's something I learned as a publicist. So I think it's my background in marketing that again is helping me as a journalist.
Okay,
Did
thank you.
I answer your question at all?
Oh, it did. And my other question is that some of us are coming from sort of these jobs where we're just used to typical either salary or, you sound really knowledgeable about personal finances. And I was just wondering if there was like, for me, that kind of thing is just, it scares me. And I could see myself getting, I don't want to say taken advantage of, but I could see myself like messing up in some way because I didn't consider something. And so I was just wondering if you had like, I don't know, just like a book or app or resource that kind of helped you in that area, or if it's just sort of something that you figured out along the way as you went along.
It's kind of been inherent for me. I was like a 6-year-old kid asking my mom to show me how to write a check and like how a credit card worked. Like I was always like concerned about the way money worked. So I keep track of my money and I like follow up when someone's a day late to pay me. I'm like, hi, where's my check? And so I think first off, you're not gonna mess up by accepting what other people might think is a low rate. I started at 5 cents a word. And even at that same time, I was writing 500-word hostel reviews for $10, which I'm not even going to try to calculate I don't want to know how many like millionths of a penny that was, right? There is no bad rate. You have to set your rates, and you have to start somewhere. I think there's kind of a fantasy in every industry that you graduate from school, or even you start working while you're in school and you get to go straight to be the CEO. You get to go straight to $4 a word. That's ridiculous. You have to put the time in. So if people start shaming you about the rates, they don't know where you're at in your career. They don't know what amount of money you need to put food on your table. They don't know what amount of money you need to pay your bills. That, you know, it took me about 2.5, 3 years to start to have a firm rate. And even still, I'm really uncomfortable rejecting work. I've probably only done it a handful of times where I've asked for more money and the editor has said no, and I've said, okay, I have to withdraw my pitch. I hate doing that. As a freelancer, you never know where your next paycheck is coming from. And even though I'm in a very financially secure place right now, I still have that hovering over my head all the time. And the best way to not get overwhelmed is to be organized. So keep track of when you submit your invoice, keep track of, do they pay net 30, net 60, net 90? You know, put this in an Excel sheet. I filed my invoice on this date. This is the date I should get paid. This is how they pay: PayPal, Trello, Payoneer, direct deposit. And then just go back every week, every 2 weeks, every month, however you feel, and check. And the follow-up email can just be, hi, my payment's now overdue. When should I expect it? You're going to spend a lot of time chasing money, and that is one of the most unfortunate aspects of this job.
Thank you.
Hey Lola, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I just had a question. Something you alluded to a little bit, and a question that you kind of answered, but I must have lost your connection because I couldn't really hear what you said. But it was kind of about when you have an idea that you pitch to an editor, and let's say for whatever reason it doesn't work out between you two. How do you protect your idea from being stolen? How do you protect your idea from that editor just going to the next freelancer? It's like, hey, why don't you write about this? And it happens to be your idea. You know, how do you prevent that from happening?
I really don't think that happens so often. I honestly think it's coincidence when it does. It would be different if I had pitched a personal essay about something I lived through, and then they somehow found someone else who lived through something so similar to write about it, right? But this comes back to the short pitch. In 300 words, how many details are you really giving the editor? You know, and the editor, whether you're interviewing someone for a feature, they don't have the relationships that you have, you know? So if it's just a straight listicle, let's say you're pitching a listicle of the 10 best vegan shampoos, don't write all 10 in the pitch. Say, such as option 1, option 2, option 3. You know, that don't give your whole idea in a pitch. Never give your whole idea to anything until you have a contract. But I really think it's super unlikely that an editor is going to steal your pitch. Unfortunately, it does happen. Like I have heard of editors. I don't think this happened to me directly, but I've heard of editors telling freelancers like, oh, we're actually going to cover this in-house. And they don't make it super clear if they were already planning on covering it in-house before they read your pitch, or if they read your pitch and were like, cool, my staff writer can write this. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Lola. I am kind of a fan of yours. I follow you on Twitter, and that's where I heard about this webinar. And I'm actually like an early career journalist. I graduated school about a year ago, and I've been working at a local blog. I actually am in Canada. I live in Toronto, and I'm really unhappy in my job and not getting to do like the type of writing that I want to do at all. And so I'm really thinking of making the transition, the lunge, I guess, into freelancing. And I'm wondering how long it took you to be financially stable, you know, not necessarily at the place you're at now, but feel like you could support yourself on freelancing pretty much alone.
That's so dependent on your cost of living. So it's kind of hard for me to say that, you know, up until the pandemic, I had been living mostly in Southeast Asia for the last 4 years. So my monthly expenses were maybe $1,000 to $1,200 maximum. And if I needed to spend less, I could. I mostly paid between $300 to $500 a month for the places that I was renting, food was quite inexpensive, experiences were inexpensive, traveling between places was inexpensive. So I never really felt a pressure to make a certain amount of money. Like I set goals for myself that I felt like were realistic based on the kind of earnings I was making and what I projected I could make. So I believe my first year of full-time freelancing, I made $5,000, and I've now more than doubled that every year. But the first few years, it was kind of like, then I got close to 10, then I got close to 15, and then I got close, I think 28. No, I have doubled it every year then. So it really depends on your cost of living. Like I'm now in Uruguay and the rent here is much more expensive. I'm paying $700 now, and I'll be paying $800 for the summer. I'm going to live by the beach. So that's double what I used to pay, you know, but it's also not what I paid in New York City. Like people tell me all the time, oh, you must have so much money to be traveling all the time. And I'm like, no, I don't have a $2,000 rent anymore. Like that's why I can afford it. You know, my way of life in New York City was extremely expensive. Leave New York is the answer to everyone else who's in New York.
I'm in Toronto, which is Canada's version of New York. So definitely not cheap to live.
Yeah, exactly. You probably have a high cost of living. So living in a place where my expenses aren't unreasonable has certainly helped me along the way.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions from other people in the audience? Oh, wait, Sabrina, you raised your hand. Sabrina, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Hold on, let me put the video on. Hey, thank you so much for being here. This is really, really fascinating. I guess I'm just curious, how does, say, pitching a personal essay differ to pitching, you know, a hard news or like a reported piece? Because, for example, I don't really have much experience in personal essay writing in general, and I just feel like it's kind of, how do you toe that line between like what you usually write and what you know, want to write in terms of an essay? I don't know if that question made sense, but.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I actually find it a lot more difficult to pitch personal essays because I just start writing the whole essay. I'm like, this is what happened to me, and la 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 la. And the best advice I've received from one of my editors at InStyle was that a personal essay should not be a page from your diary. So any personal essays I've written or pitched or been assigned have been relevant to the news cycle. So although it's not a news piece, it has a news hook. Does that make sense? So obviously during Hispanic Heritage Month, I was writing quite a lot about the Latinx experience. I've written a lot about sexual assault, especially during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, not trial, hearings. And you know, the things that are relevant to that, I wrote a piece for Bustle about how I feel like the Latinx community is always going to be endangered in the US after the shooting in El Paso. So things like that are kind of a timely news hook. And really keeping a personal essay pitch short can be hard because you want the editor to see the value of your story. In a personal essay, you are sharing something you've gone through, but you need the reader to be able to see themselves in the experience or learn something from your experience. So that's what makes it different than a diary entry or like a therapy session, right? And generally with most personal essays, especially as they relate to my experience as a Latina or my experience with sexual assault, I almost always include expert commentary. So I almost always include in my pitch that, you know, this is my perspective based on what I've lived through, but I'm going to speak with a psychiatrist, a sex therapist, or whoever it may be to fold in their expert opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, was someone else talking? Oh, sorry, there is a raised hand. Go ahead.
Hey, Lola, thank you for joining us. It's a real pleasure. My question is, your years as a Latina, do you feel that the newsrooms are being diversified now, especially with the changes that are going with race?
I'm not sure as far as newsrooms go, just because of the freelance, so I don't really have, I'm not really a fly on the wall in those rooms, but there are some really amazing groups on Facebook, like Latinas in Journalism, Latinx writers. I can send Danielle a list that she can then share with everyone. And I am seeing a lot of posts for job opportunities in those groups from Latinas who are already in the newsroom saying, I really want to put forward a Latina for this job opportunity. So within this community, people are looking out for each other and trying to help each other fill those roles. As a freelancer, I realized that the editors I continue to pitch are people of color, especially when it comes to personal essays, that the editors that I have felt like have taken care of my stories have been the ones who might be able to relate to the things that I'm writing about. Not to say I don't also have amazing white editors, because I do.
Thank you. Thank you for being here too. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for being here.
Are there any more questions?
I had a question actually.
Go ahead.
Hi Lola, thank you for joining us today. My question is actually, you mentioned that there's a lot of times where you're chasing money and you're kind of hoping, you get paid, because obviously that's kind of important to keep living. But, there are times when, because of an aspect like that, some of us might feel scared to go into freelancing because, you have to pay bills, you have to have health insurance, which, the US isn't exactly on top of that for everyone yet. How do you get over that fear? How do you kind of approach, saying, this is something possible, it's just going to take, a monumental amount of work at first?
Totally. I always see a lot of takes on Twitter that to be a freelance writer, you have to have generational wealth or have savings or have access, because of gatekeeping. And somehow I managed to maneuver my way around that. When I started freelancing, I had $200. I had left my job in Italy. They owed me $12,000. They had not paid me. I took an overnight bus to Croatia, to the Balkans, where you can live comfortably for $10 to $15 a day, and was determined not to return to the US. And that's when I saw that first job, and I was doing the hostel reviews. So I was being allowed to stay in the hostel for free for 3 days, cooking my food there, making $10 to review it. It all kind of worked out. Eventually, though, I did get that, I don't remember if it was $10,000 or $12,000 from the company in Italy. And that gave me some security, right? So, and when I left New York, I also had saved $10,000. So not to say you have to have $10,000 saved to start as a freelancer, but I've gone from having a nice padding to having absolutely nothing in my bank account. I think many writers do other things as well, especially because it can take so long to get paid. So something that I've been considering lately, or I've been trying to take note of, is on my very long Excel sheet with all of these things I've talked about, is how long did it take someone to pay me? So even if they pay me $1 a word, but it took a year, do I really want to pitch that publication again? Because can I really wait a year again to get paid that $1,000? Or could I write 4 articles and get paid within a month? And I do also do some writing for brands, like branded blogs. And I find they pay me almost immediately. Like almost all of them PayPal me, Venmo me, direct deposit me when I file the piece. And that's been amazing to keep my bank account afloat. So kind of diversifying your different streams, even within writing, I think is important. And I mean, any kind of job you should have savings, but yeah, it sucks not to have a salary. It sucks not to know where your money is coming from next. And it can be super disheartening. Financial departments at publications don't seem to really care. I wish I had a better answer, but I think this is, again, a kind of thing that we each kind of have to work out on our own, that, what is our absolute minimum cost of living? Like, what number do we have to reach every month? And if we can't do that through writing, what do we do to supplement that time? Is it dog walking, babysitting, bartending? Like, I would suggest, if you can, doing something that's not going to be super consuming of your brain, because writing takes up a lot of mental energy. So if you can find another way to make ends meet that's even maybe more fun and like bring some joy to your life, that could be a good route to take.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I feel like I
No, yeah,
don't feel like I have a very direct answer for that, because it's everyone's really your own experience.
No, of course. Thank you so much.
Of course.
John, go ahead.
Hi, Lola. Thank you so much for being here. This was super interesting. I was just curious if you had just an article that you wrote as a freelancer that you're particularly proud of, maybe your favorite piece that you've written.
Oh, that's such a loaded question. Okay, so I wrote a piece last week or 2 weeks ago about Megyn Kelly. I don't know if people saw this. I don't know if you saw it, Danielle, but she was not happy with my article. And it was about her, no, it had to be 2 weeks ago because basically it was her Twitter reaction to the first presidential debate where she was just focusing on kind of the jabs that Trump was making towards Biden and the very few things that Biden said about Trump. Megyn Kelly was not happy. So she retweeted this article, insulted my journalism, told me I should try to be a real political analysis like she is, which would be, I guess, tweeting about political jokes. And it went totally viral. And it was a piece for Refinery 29 that I had written on a trial day with them. So I did a trial day where essentially I wrote 3 articles that day with the hopes that they might hire me to be one of their political writers. I didn't get the job, which is completely understandable because I don't have a lot of political writing experience, but the piece totally went viral. And then all of my Twitter friends went up to bat for me, like tweeting at Megyn Kelly, telling her, you know, to stand down. And I actually had a lot of fun with it because this person who is unemployed was telling me how to do my job when I was making money to do my job. So I told her, I'm going to keep doing journalism my way, Megyn Kelly, but thank you.
Also, question I have that I feel like you and I would probably have a lot of the same ones, but this would be really good, I think, for everyone to know. What are your favorite resources or newsletters to find opportunities?
Sonia's News Opportunities of the Week is excellent. There's Study Hall, which I also think is excellent, and they have a $1 a month program for BIPOC, which is great. There are a few others. I think they're mostly British ones. I can't even think of what they're called, but I get at least like 10 a week in my inbox. And like I said, I'm pretty active on Twitter, so I've actually usually already seen most of the opportunities, but it's nice to see them again and see if I've missed anything. And I do think these are worthwhile investments. I believe Sonia's is $3 a month. They do have a lot of crossover, like a lot of the opportunities you see on Sonia's newsletter are also on the Study Hall newsletter. But if you don't have the time to dig in deep to Twitter and find these ops yourself, then spending $4 a month is not a huge investment if you're going to be able to land $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 worth of work from those newsletters. And it can also help it can help you find the editors that are putting out calls for pitches and start to follow them too. So as you're building your own editorial list, these can be really great investments, even if it's temporary.
Amazing, and I agree with you. I know we're all very busy, especially you, Lola. So if there are any last questions, you can either raise your hand or just chime in. Otherwise, I think, is there anything else you want to add, Lola? Just like advice?
Sure, like you mentioned before, I do consultations. So mostly they're focused on pitches. So generally the way it works, I ask a writer to send me 3 drafts of pitches, and I go into this pitch and I workshop it with a really firm hand in a Google Doc, and I track, I'd make it suggestions so you can see where I'm cutting out slack, where I'm making it shorter, where I'm making it tighter. I highlight, like, this should be a link. What kind of source is this? What date did this happen? Like, I try to go in there thinking about what information is missing. And then I do that before we have our call so that the writer can get a chance to either go in and accept and reject the changes, see if they have any additional questions. So generally we spend about 20 minutes going over those 3 pitches. If they have publications in mind, I pull those contacts for them, or we can talk about potential outlets that might be interested in this type of piece. I also ask them advance the call to send me their list of questions. It can be as long as they want. We'll get through as many as we can in that time. And then additionally, they get added to my private Facebook group, which I believe now is about 22 writers. So all these calls for pitches that I'm seeing on Twitter, on newsletters, everywhere, I'm putting into the group constantly and tagging the writers that I think would have a story for the particular call for pitches. based on the beats that I know they cover. So the fee, the investment for that is $200. And then you're in the group, and in the group, I have an editorial database of 1,500 contacts, I believe. There's one member who's responsible for updating the list, and she's amazing. She really keeps it up to date. And it's also it's a really small community. And what I ask is that all the writers that join us post their questions there, because I am not the end all be all. Everything I've told you today is just based on my experience. Other writers are going to have other suggestions, and they might have a suggestion that aligns more with your goals, with your experience, with what you're trying to attain, more than what my feedback might give. So it's become a really beautiful space that I'm really proud of. I also, you can book that on my website, but on my website are the lolaandmendez.com/consultations. I've linked to 2.5 hours of other webinars like this that I've done. So if you feel like you've learned something from me today, I encourage you to watch those too. They're completely free. A lot of them go specific into rejection or pitching or other things that we might not have dove really deep into today. I also have linked to the article that I wrote for Business Insider about how I managed to reach $12,000 in September, and outline more of how my consultation service really works.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I know you're so busy, and it's, oh, actually, I guess it's not actually that late there, but thank you, really.
I have 2 more articles to write today, though.
Okay, so you so much work. Thank you so much. This was so informative and amazing, and I'm really, really grateful. So
thank you everyone for tuning in and giving me a chance to share my experience with you. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me.
Thank you, and have a good luck with the rest of your articles of the day. And I'm sure I'll see you on Twitter soon. And everyone else, thank you all so much for coming. And everyone follow her on Twitter. I'll like send out an email to the group with all of your information so everyone can follow it, and it'll be easy.
I tweet lots of stuff about journalism between my inappropriate tweets about my life.
All right, thank you so much again.
Thank you. Everyone have a great weekend.